Hello and welcome to this week's IG Live. This is our new time on Thursdays at 9 o'clock Pacific, 12 o'clock noon Eastern time, which I believe works out to be about 5 o'clock in England. So trying to cover all of the time zones. Hello. And today we are going to be talking to a longtime member, and that's Ronni from Multicultural Motherhood and Language Therapy. And especially for those of you who are raising bilingual or multilingual kids, you're going to want to hear this conversation because there are a lot of misconceptions out there that we're going to talk about. Hello.
Hello. I've got my baby
Aww.
here in the saloon asleep. Right on cue, she fell asleep.
Well, I'll try not to be too loud so not to wake her up.
She's used to the noise with 4 older siblings.
That's true. Well, thank you for joining us and taking the time. I think this is a perfect example of how, as busy parents, we're trying to juggle so many different things, and you are such an expert at that, about juggling motherhood and your professional life, and yet how you kind of integrate them all together instead of necessarily keeping them as like separate spheres that you're involved in. But anyway, why don't we go ahead and jump in and you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's really good to speak to you, Leanna, after all of this time. I think we have spoken once or twice before, probably in a Zoom call or something, but yeah, it's nice to speak to you again. So yeah, I'm Ronni and my account is Multicultural Motherhood. I also have a blog by the same name. And I started that blog, I don't know, maybe about 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. I can't even remember how long ago. Long time ago, but I blog on and off, but I would say I'm most active on Instagram at the moment, just because I'm so busy juggling work, motherhood, homeschooling. So yeah, it's easier for me to keep up to date with Instagram than anything else. But yeah, I live in the southwest of England and I have 5 children. The eldest is 13, and then I have an 11-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-month-old who's currently asleep on me right now. So yeah, I've just been juggling things over the last few months, having, it's quite different having a newborn again after 5 years. But yeah, we're getting into the swing of things now, and yeah, it's brilliant. So I'm currently not working at the moment that much because obviously I have a new baby. Normally I work as a speech and language therapist, which over there in the States, that's what you would call a speech language pathologist. So yeah, same job. And yeah, it's really great. I work with mostly bilingual families, actually, because that's one of my specialisms. And I absolutely love to work with bilingual families, supporting them to raise bilingual children. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to speaking a bit more about that today.
Yeah, definitely. If we have time, it might also, since you mentioned it, it might be interesting to talk about, how you do manage to do with the homeschooling and your work, how you manage to keep up with all of that, or what balance you find. But let's talk about the speech and language therapy. How did you get interested in that, and especially with the focus on bilingualism?
Well, a couple of my brothers actually had speech therapy when they were younger. So while I was growing up, it was always something that I was aware of. And then because I just had a real interest in languages, but I was also interested in kind of the science of languages and how to support people, especially bilinguals, I kind of went down the speech and language therapy route. And it wasn't really until I had already qualified as a speech and language therapist that I studied further to gain more training and stuff in bilingualism, because really sadly during my course we didn't have that much training on bilingualism. There was probably only 1 or 2 lectures over about 3.5, 4 years, which is really crazy because the amount of bilinguals, even in the UK, there's a lot, but I think in the States there's probably even more, because I know there's a lot of Spanish speakers in the States, isn't there? So yeah, it's really crazy that we don't get more training in bilingualism, sadly. But yeah, anyway, I actually did some postgraduate research on bilingual children with autism. So that's how I gained my extra knowledge in bilingualism and autism as well. So autism is my other specialism. And yeah, I just love supporting bilingual families. I think it's really important to raise a child to speak the home language as well as the majority language, the language of the environment, because I think it's really important for their identity growing up, as well as being able to speak to like family members and other members of the community. I think it's really important for identity as well.
Right, especially because, like you said, it's so often connected to culture and heritage and family. It's not just the language. But could you, for those of us who aren't that familiar with it, could you explain exactly what do you do as a speech and language therapist?
Yeah. Okay, so I work with children. Some speech and language therapists work with adults, but I choose to work with children. And I support them with a wide variety of different speech and language and communication issues. So I will work with children who have language difficulties, maybe little ones who have a language delay. I work with children who have speech sound difficulties, maybe just a difficulty saying a particular speech sound. And I also work with children with autism on their social skills and communication. And I work with lots of different types of children. Maybe they've got some social difficulties, maybe they've got like developmental language disorder. There's quite a lot of different conditions that would lead to a language difficulty, you know, like children with Down syndrome, lots of different genetic conditions, but also just ones with a language delay. Yeah, so lots of different areas. And some speech and language therapists do actually work with children with swallowing difficulties as well. So they're into the eating and drinking and supporting families around that. But I don't do that. I just go down the language and social communication route mainly.
It's interesting because I have to say, until we started using some speech therapy a few years ago, I didn't realize that it also encompassed those social skills, because those are communication skills. I thought, I mean, when I was growing up, I knew some kids that had speech therapy, and it was usually about like stuttering or something like that. And it seems like the definition has expanded a lot, and now it's much more all-encompassing, which is really exciting, because there are a lot of you know, a lot of those skills that kids might need help with, like you say, especially if somebody is on the autism spectrum. And I was just wondering also about, specifically about for bilingual families, why is it important if they have a child that they're worried there's a speech delay or something along those lines? Why is it so important that they find a speech therapist who has the specialism of bilingualism? Because I know there are a
Yeah.
lot of myths out there and so on. So why is that important to find someone with that specialty?
Yeah, well, sadly, there are a lot of myths about bilingualism, as you say. One of the main myths is that children who are bilingual are actually later talkers than those who are monolingual. And we know that's completely not true. Research shows that the delay is only about 2 to 3 months, which in the grand scheme of things is hardly anything, really. Because, you know, a monolingual child, rather than saying their first word at 12 months, could say it at 9 months, or, you know, a couple of months after they turn 1, and it wouldn't be a cause for concern. So if a bilingual child says their first word, you know, 14 months instead of 12 months, it's not an issue. So yeah, it really does not cause a language delay. And what's really important when you're thinking about whether your bilingual child might have a language delay, it's really important to count their total vocabulary. So that's the number of words they can speak in all of their languages. So for example, when a bilingual child, when any child is about 2 years old, so 24 months, they should be saying between 50 to 200 words. Now, for a monolingual child, they will say all of those words, obviously, in one language. But for a bilingual child, you know, they may have 50 words in Spanish and 50 words in English, right? So it's important to calculate their total vocabulary, and that will tell you whether they have a delay, and not just look at how many words can they speak in one of their languages, because that isn't all of the words that they know. Okay, and a lot of people will not realize this, especially, I mean, speech and language therapists are getting better at knowing about bilingualism, but you often find other health professionals, maybe doctors or health visitors, they don't have that much knowledge on it, and they may, or even nursery workers, you know, if your child, you know, has gone to nursery at the age of 2 or earlier, and they will quite often say, oh, it doesn't matter that they don't know that many words yet because they're bilingual, bilinguals late talkers. That's complete rubbish. If your child is 2 years old, they're not saying at least 50 words, total vocabulary in all of their languages, then they are a late talker and they should be seen. Because what I find often in the UK is that children who are bilingual will not get referred to speech and language therapy until they're older because of this misconception. So the health visitor might say, oh, your child's a late talker because they're bilingual. We won't refer it to, we'll wait until they're 3. And then they've missed out on a whole year of intervention, which could have been really beneficial to them. So I think it's very important that we raise awareness that bilingualism does not cause a language delay. If you have concerns, you really have to push with your health professionals and say, no, I know it doesn't cause a language delay. I'm concerned. Please refer me to speech and language. It's really important that people start to become more aware of this.
That's interesting, because I guess I would have thought it would be the opposite, that pediatricians would be more concerned about your kids, but you're saying actually they tend not to get as much attention until they're later. So what are some of the signs that parents should be looking for if they have some concern, or what should be some red flags that they should really be pushing? I mean, you mentioned about the number of words that they're speaking total. Are there other things that they need to watch out for as far as needing support from a speech and language therapist?
Yeah, so also whether they're able to join words together. So at the age of 2, 24 months, we say that children should be putting 2 words together. Okay, so it's not just them saying single words for things. They should be starting to put words together like, milk please, or push car, or things like that, 2 words together. And if they're not doing that, that's another red flag. But I would say more often than, similarly to language, there are social communication skills that would raise red flags as well. Is the child playing in a usual way? Are they trying to interact with you? Are they making eye contact? Are they trying to, how are they interacting with other children? Because those are the kinds of things we would look out for if we think there might be autism. If that might be a concern, or, about their behaviors. Do they have any repetitive behaviors? How are they with changes in routine? So those kind of things we would look out for as well, not just the language, but social communication skills are really important, because research actually shows that social skills are a better predictor of life success than academic achievements. So I think most people don't realise that how important social skills are. And often children with autism, even if they have really good language skills, they may struggle with social skills. And then that holds them back from developing friendships and getting on at school and getting on at life. So social skills are also really important.
And why is that early intervention so important? I mean, you mentioned about how there sometimes can be problems if someone doesn't get referred until they're older. Why is that early intervention so important?
Well, research shows that the earlier they get the intervention, the better the outcomes. Because if you think about it, if a child misses out on a year of intervention, that's them missing out of a year of being able to communicate, a year of being able to learn those skills that they need to interact and to get on. Because it's really difficult, I think, especially when you have a toddler, sometimes I think the behavior, the terrible twos that people call it can actually be put down to their language skills or lack of language skills, because you may be saying something to them, go and get your coat on, go and do this, do that, and they don't do it, and you think they're being defiant, but actually maybe they're understanding. Maybe they're not understanding the instructions. And so, if you can support them to communicate really early on, then it just helps everyone have a more easier time and be happier and, better for family harmony and things like that. Yeah.
Right. Like you said, I mean, a lot of the behavior problems come from that frustration they have of not communicating, or your frustration that they're not understanding what you're talking about. I was wondering, just in general, can you share what has surprised you in your own journey of raising bilingual kids? And I'm not sure, were you raised speaking more than one language, or were you monolingual growing up?
I think this is why I'm really pushed for bilingualism so much, because I am from a bilingual family, but I was only brought up speaking English. So both my parents are actually Polish, and both of them spoke Polish as their first language. But growing up in the UK, 30 odd years ago, they didn't realise how important it was to maintain that home language. they thought it was better for me and my siblings to be able to speak English because that was the language of society, that was the language of education. And they thought it might be a hindrance actually to speak Polish as well. But we know now that actually that's a complete load of rubbish because, you know, if you look at the whole world, most people around the world are growing up speaking more than one language. So it's actually more normal to be bilingual than to be monolingual. And I think that's what people don't understand as well. So unfortunately, I didn't grow up speaking another language. I am bilingual now because my husband's from Turkey and now I speak Turkish as well. So now I am bilingual and I'm trying to raise my children bilingual, but it's definitely a lot harder than I thought. You know, you really have to make a conscious effort to raise a bilingual child because it's so easy to just go to the majority language. You know, once your kids start school, and our kids are homeschooled, but I know a lot of parents whose kids go to school, as soon as they go to school, they start speaking English. And then they refuse to speak the home language at home to their parents. They go through this stage where they do that, and it can become really difficult. And it can be, you know, it can really cause problems sometimes in the family. But I think my advice to those parents would be, if your child is refusing to speak the minority language, you just need to be patient with them. And I think the main thing is to keep speaking the language to them and keep maintaining their understanding a bit, because if they've got that understanding, then they will be able to use it later on when they get over this phase of, you know, just speaking English. When they get older and they have more of an understanding about how important the language is and what they need it for, then it will definitely benefit them and they will start to speak it more. But also, some tips that I can give really for parents raising bilingual children is, you know, try and get them to hear the language from more than one person. So it can be really tricky if it's just you're on your own trying to pass on this language to the child. And it's actually really important for children to hear the language from more than one person as well, because we know that there's a lot of variety in the language. You know, no two speakers really speak the same. They might use slightly different vocabulary, they might have different intonation and things like that. So you want your child to hear the variety in the language as well. So that's why it's quite important for them to hear it from other speakers. But also it can be a real motivation for them if they have friends who speak the language as well, and they say, oh, you know, my friends are actually speaking to their parents. That means it's okay for me to speak to my parents. Because, you know, children they have a lot of peer pressure, don't they? Even though, you know, you try to, you know, say to them, oh, you don't have to be like your peers or whatever. But, you know, peer pressure does play a big part, I think, in children's life as they're growing up. So if they can see that their friends are speaking the language too, then they're definitely going to be more likely to want to try speak with their friends. They'll be more comfortable speaking it to you. So, yeah, I think that's one of the main things, really.
Yeah, and I love that you said about having patience and getting through sometimes the rough patches, because I think that a lot of people, they get very frustrated and discouraged, you know, when their kids aren't responding or they don't want to. But as you say, you have to play the long game and look at the overall journey together. And especially, like you said, to still have that patience, I think is important. So I love that you emphasize that. And yeah, we can't discount the idea of peer pressure, positive peer pressure. And it also, like you said, it can be such a good motivator for them, and also introduce that need, right? You know, that they want to, that they really are motivated to speak it. And very true what you were talking about making sure they hear it from more than one person, because I know we've had that experience. I hadn't really thought about it until you mentioned it, that my kids are used to hearing Spanish from me and my husband, and then if somebody else speaks to them in Spanish, it really throws them off. Sometimes it's the different accent, slightly different vocabulary, or like you said, just that individual variation in how people phrase things or say it, and that tends to throw them off. So that's a really good point too, having kind of like a community support that they can hear that from. And which I don't know, do you think, does media help with that a lot, or is it better to have kind of the in-person interaction?
Well, you know, I think in these days when we use Zoom a lot, Zoom can be great for this as well, because, you know, you might want them to speak to family members abroad, and they can do that via Zoom. You know, just get your grandparents or whatever on Zoom. It's a really good way for you to keep in touch, for them to maintain a relationship with their family abroad, and for them to also be practicing the language with other people. So I think media definitely can play a really good role in that. in terms of things like TV programs and things like that, children, very young children, do not learn language from screens. So typically developing children, they don't learn language from screens when they're very young. And if you don't think this is the case, just try yourself. Just switch on a TV program in a language you don't know and see how many words that you can pick up. Because, you know, when children are very young, they can't even work out where one word ends and another word begins. It's like a whole stream of sound, right? And that's the same for you. If you were to switch on the TV program in another language you didn't know, you wouldn't pick up anything. But there gets to a stage where the children know, you know, a certain amount of words, and they are starting to learn how to put words together, where they can actually then start to learn vocabulary from TV programs. And me as an adult, I find TV really helpful when I want to like improve my Turkish. I will just watch some Turkish like drama series, and I can learn a lot of words from that actually. So right at the very beginning, it's not helpful. But as they get older and as they progress in learning the language and their skills get better, they can then start to learn vocabulary and learn the language from TV shows. So yeah, it's definitely good. But once they get like at least to the age of like maybe 2.5 to 3, then I would say if they've got like a good level of language at that age, then they will be able to learn stuff, and it can be really good and motivating for them. I know some families who actually don't let their kids watch TV in the majority language, and they say if you want to watch TV, you have to watch it in the minority language. So that can be quite a good motivator sometimes as well.
I love it. Well, we're coming up on time, so I want to make sure you have a chance to tell us, first of all, where people can find you online, and of course we'll have the link to your Instagram page in the caption. But can you also tell us about like the courses that you have available and so on?
Yeah, so you can find me on my blog, multiculturalmotherhood.com, and obviously on Instagram. I do have a Facebook page as well, but I would say I'm more active on Instagram. But yeah, I actually support, I actually run speech and language therapy sessions and assessments via Zoom mainly now. So I can actually assess children and work with them all over the world, which is something that's really good and which has come out since the pandemic, really. So yeah, I'm available to work with families all over the world who would like speech and language therapy for their children. Another thing that I offer actually is bilingual family consultations. So if you are a bilingual family, if you're a parent with bilingual children and you want some support in how to raise them bilingual, you want a language plan put together, I can actually offer those individual consultations as well. And then the final thing I offer is my online courses. So my most popular course is the Raising Talkers course, and this is for parents of 0 to 5-year-olds who want to be empowered with the knowledge to support their children's language skills. So it's either for those children who are late talkers, or it's for parents who have a baby or a young child and they just want to know how to communicate with their child in the best way so that they don't develop a language delay, so that their language skills develop really well. So I'm actually running that course next week. It's starting on Monday, and it's a 4-week online course. And each week you will get a video and a PDF guide, and I will also be doing a live Q&A every week. So if there's any questions you have about the course, about your child, then you can just submit the question and I'll answer them as well. So that's what's starting next week. And there's also another course I run that's very popular, particularly with homeschoolers, and it's the Emergent Literacy course. And this is all about parents who are about to teach their child to read, and it's all about knowing how to assess their child's readiness for learning to read and what skills their children need to know before they are able to learn to read, because it's not just as simple as I want to teach my toddler to read. You know, I actually talk a lot about how we should delay it until the child is ready, getting them to know all the skills that they need to know, and also talk a lot about different approaches to learning to read and supporting them on their journey. So that course is also starting next Monday. So if you're interested in either of those courses, you've only got a couple more days to sign up, and I'm not going to run them again probably until, you know, November, December time. So now's a good time to do them, and you can just go to the link in my bio on Instagram at Multicultural Motherhood, and you'll be able to see it as the links in my bio. So I've got a Linktree link and it lists all the different things, so you can see the Raising Talkers course and the Emergent Literacy course. So yeah, just click on those and sign up.
Yeah, so don't delay. You only have a few days left
Yeah,
to take it,
exactly.
or else you have to wait until November, December. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and talk about this. I think it's such an important topic, especially for bilingual families. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to share with us about it.
Thank you so much, Leanna. It's been really lovely talking to you.
Yeah, same. So nice to actually talk to you in person. Well, not in person, but I mean, live.
Yeah.
Actually talk to you instead of just commenting on each other's posts. So thank you for that. And thanks to everybody who joined us. This will be up on Instagram in just a few minutes, and then we will also have it on our YouTube channel later. Thank you.